This video is based on publicly available reporting from ESPN, NFL Network, CBS Sports, Fox Sports, Bleacher Report, and other credible sports media outlets. Contract figures, player quotes, and timelines reflect information as reported during the 2025 NFL offseason and minicamp period. Some negotiations and situations were still developing at the time of reporting. This content is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. All views and analysis are the narrator's own interpretation of publicly available facts. They were supposed to be practicing, suited up on the field, doing their jobs. Instead, some of the most dominant defensive players in the entire National Football League went silent, absent from mandatory minicamp, racking up six-figure fines, posting cryptic peace signs on social media, and delivering bombshell statements to the press that sent the entire football world into a frenzy. This wasn't just a few grumpy athletes complaining about money. This was a coordinated league-wide standoff, a collision between elite talent and stubborn front offices that threatened to reshape rosters, blow up locker rooms, and change the financial landscape of professional football forever. And it all erupted during one single week of NFL minicamp. If you want to understand how the NFL really works behind the closed doors, behind the perfectly scripted press conferences and the highlight reels, hit subscribe. Because what unfolded across the league during minicamp week in June 2025 was one of the most chaotic, dramatic, and revealing chapters in recent NFL history. Don't go anywhere. Let's go back to the beginning. You have to understand the pressure cooker that NFL minicamp week represents. Mandatory minicamps are the NFL's last intensive on-field work before training camps kick off in July. Unlike organized team activities, teams can fine players who skip out on minicamp practices. So missing practice in June doesn't come without a penalty. This is not a voluntary workout. This is not an optional walkthrough. This is the last official gathering before the full machinery of an NFL season kicks into gear, and players who skip it are making a calculated, expensive, public statement. And in June 2025, several of the biggest names in football decided the statement was worth making. Let's start where the drama was loudest, where it was most personal, and where it carried the heaviest weight. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, home of the Pittsburgh Steelers' T.J. Watt. Say that name to any football fan, and they will immediately understand what it means. Four-time All-Pro, Defensive Player of the Year in 2021. A player who in 2021 tied Michael Strawn's legendary single-season sack record with 22.5. A man who, over his career up to that point, had accumulated 108 career sacks and led the NFL in sacks 3 separate times. In 8 seasons, Watt amassed 462 total tackles, including 126 for loss with 108 sacks and 225 quarterback hits. This is not a role player. This is not a fringe Pro Bowler trying to squeeze one last payday. TJ Watt is arguably the most dominant defensive player of his generation. And in June 2025, his contract situation had reached a boiling point that had every Steelers fan in Western Pennsylvania holding their breath. CBS Sports The Numbers told the story starkly. Watt had signed a 4-year, $112 million extension with the Steelers entering the 2021 season, averaging $28 million per year. But Myles Garrett had reset the pass rusher market just 3 months earlier, with a record deal averaging $40 million annually. The math was brutal and obvious. Watt had signed his deal as the most expensive defender in the game, and within 4 years the market had exploded past him. He was entering the final season of that contract, and no new extension had materialized. The Steelers had remained steadfast in their optimism that a deal would get done. General Manager Omar Khan told reporters in March that he was very hopeful that TJ will finish his career as a Steeler. That sounds reassuring on the surface. But behind the scenes, insiders were reporting something far more alarming. NFL Network's Ian Rappaport and Mike Garafolo both reported that TJ Watt would not be attending Pittsburgh's mandatory minicamp, and crucially, there had been no progress on a long-term deal. None. Zero. On the eve of mandatory minicamp, with the fines ticking upward, the Steelers and their most valuable player were nowhere near an agreement. According to Pittsburgh insider Mark Kaboly, the sticking points were essentially everything. The length of the deal, the guarantees, and the total value were all still being argued. Think about that. This wasn't a negotiation where two sides were haggling over final numbers after agreeing on the big picture. These were negotiations where the big picture itself was still a blank canvas. And as Watt skipped day 1 of minicamp, and then day 2, and then day 3, He faced fines of $17,462 for the first day, $34,925 for the second day, and $52,381 for the third day, totaling $104,768 for a 3-day absence. He paid over $100,000 out of his own pocket, rather, than walk through that door without a deal he believed in. And then came the moment that truly electrified Steelers fans and sent social media into meltdown. Watt posted what appeared to be a peace sign on social media while in a Steelers uniform, sparking fears among Steelers fans that they might lose their most valuable player after 8 seasons in Pittsburgh. Packers fans immediately caught the scent. Watt is a Wisconsin native who also played for the Badgers at the collegiate level, and fans from Green Bay began encouraging their team to pursue him, chanting "Come home" on social media platforms. The Green Bay Packers had just released Jair Alexander and freed up cap space. Suddenly, a theoretical trade scenario was turning into a very real, very frightening possibility for Pittsburgh. Steelers defensive coordinator Teryl Austin tried to keep things calm publicly. "He's handling his business," Austin said. "He's doing his thing, and we've touched base a few times this summer, but it's not about the football stuff. I'm just seeing how he's doing, how his family's doing, new baby, all that good stuff. So when TJ shows up, he'll be ready to go." It was an admirably cool response from a coaching staff that had to be privately sweating bullets. Because here is what was not being said publicly. The Pittsburgh Steelers had just undergone a dramatic offensive overhaul. They had traded for DK Metcalf. They had signed Aaron Rodgers. This was supposed to be the year Pittsburgh mounted a legitimate Super Bowl run, and their best defensive player was sitting at home with a peace sign on Instagram. Now, while Pittsburgh was holding its collective breath, 500 miles to the south in Cincinnati, an even more combustible situation was detonating in real time. Trey Hendrickson, the Cincinnati Bengals defensive end, had just come off the most dominant season of his career. He led the NFL in sacks with 17.5 in 2024, matching his own record from the previous season. He was a first-team All-Pro selection and had finished second in Defensive Player of the Year voting. By any objective measure, Hendrickson was one of the 5 best defensive players in football. And what was he being paid? A base salary of $15.8 million in 2025, the final year of his contract. The NFL's sack leader didn't even crack the top 10 for highest-paid edge rushers in the NFL. The injustice was staggering, and Hendrickson had been fighting it for years. This year marked the 3rd straight year Hendrickson had sought some sort of action on his contract. In 2023, he signed a 1-year extension that included an $8 million signing bonus. 1 year later, he wanted a long-term deal but was rebuffed. That prompted a trade request that went unanswered. He bit his tongue, played the 2024 season anyway, had the best year of his career, and now in 2025, the cycle was repeating itself with even higher stakes and far more public frustration. Hendrickson had made it clear on numerous occasions that he wanted a new deal after finishing second in NFL Defensive Player of the Year voting. He told reporters flat out that he would not play for the Bengals in 2025 without a new deal. He wasn't hinting. He wasn't posturing diplomatically. He was standing at a podium and declaring war. And then things got deeply personal. Bengals head coach Zach Taylor sent Hendrickson a text message informing him that missing minicamp would result in fines. Hendrickson didn't take kindly to it, telling reporters, "We've tried to keep it as least amount as personal as possible, but at some point in this process, it becomes personal." That quote is extraordinary. Think about what Hendrickson was really saying, a player who had delivered year after year, who had made that team's defense function despite being chronically underpaid, was now receiving text message warnings from his head coach about fines. There was no warmth there, no acknowledgement of his contributions. Just a reminder that the league's rulebook would be enforced against him. The Cincinnati front office then made a comment that became arguably the most tone-deaf, controversial statement of the entire minicamp drama. Bengals executive vice president Katie Blackburn addressed Hendrickson's situation in April and said, "Remarkably, I think he should be happy at certain rates that maybe he doesn't think he'd be happy at. I think some of it is on him to be happy at some point." The backlash was immediate and severe. Here was an executive telling one of the NFL's best defensive players, a man who led the entire league in sacks, that his unhappiness with being underpaid was essentially his own fault. Twitter, sports radio, and every locker room in the league took notice. The Bengals had already paid Joe Burrow $275 million. They had given Jamar Chase and T. Higgins extensions worth over $100 million each. The team had taken care of their stars on offense, but the man anchoring their defense was being told to be grateful for $16 million. The Bengals had over $31 million in cap space. Money was not the issue. But Hendrickson was dealing with a franchise that historically didn't give substantial guaranteed money beyond year one, and that structure was the core of the dispute. He wasn't just fighting for dollars. He was fighting for the architecture of his deal, the guarantees, the security, the respect encoded in cold financial language. And by skipping minicamp and absorbing over $100,000 in fines, he made it abundantly clear he was not backing down. Meanwhile, at the same facility, there was a secondary storyline unfolding that showed just how deep Cincinnati's contract dysfunction ran. Defensive end Shamar Stewart, the 17th overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, remained unsigned at Cincinnati's minicamp. This impasse stemmed from disputes over bonus structure and guarantee language rather than salary itself. The Bengals were apparently looking to set a new precedent by allowing the team to void future guarantees. A rookie who had just been selected in the top 20 of the draft couldn't get his contract signed because the team wanted contractual language that would effectively give them the ability to escape their financial commitments. The Bengals were looking to set a new precedent by allowing the team to void future guarantees with their first-round pick. This wasn't just about Hendrickson anymore. This was a pattern. This was a philosophy. Now let's travel north to the nation's capital, where another star was making his own statement. Terry McLaurin, the consummate professional and face of the Washington Commanders receiving corps, didn't report for minicamp. This wasn't an impulsive decision. McLaurin had done this before. He had also skipped both spring workouts and mandatory June camp back in 2022 before securing his current extension. This sure felt like the sequel to that short-lived saga. Washington was committed to title contention in 2025, having added Deebo Samuel as a new running mate for McLaurin alongside quarterback Jaden Daniels. McLaurin was approaching 30, but was also due for a raise after 5 straight 1,000-yard seasons, including a seamless connection with Jaden Daniels. McLaurin had done everything right. He had never complained publicly. He had never demanded a trade. He had been the professional standard against which Commanders' wide receivers were measured. And yet here he was, skipping mandatory minicamp to make a point that the organization needed to acknowledge what he was worth. The irony was not lost on observers. Washington was riding a wave of momentum into 2025, coming off a historic run from young QB Daniels, and the man who had been catching passes for that franchise through its darkest years was having to fight for fair compensation on the eve of the good times. And then there was Dallas. And when there is drama in the NFL, there is always Dallas. Micah Parsons was entering the final season of his 5-year rookie contract, due to earn just over $24 million in 2025. For context, Myles Garrett had signed a 4-year, $160 million extension with the Browns that made him the highest-paid defensive player in NFL history. Parsons was a 3-time All-Pro entering his prime at age 26, and he had made his position clear to anyone who would listen. I would say I'm more in my prime than a lot of these other guys who are more in the second half of their career. He wasn't wrong. But in Dallas, nothing ever moves cleanly or quietly when Jerry Jones is involved. What made the Parsons situation uniquely explosive was not just the money, it was the process. Parsons publicly announced he would actually attend minicamp, posting on social media, "I will be there. I haven't missed a minicamp in 4 years. Even though the contract is not done, I have teammates and a playbook. I'm preparing as if I will be on the field the first week of camp. But it's in the owner's hands. I'm ready to win a Super Bowl." That last sentence, "it's in the owner's hands," was a dagger delivered with a smile. Parsons was publicly attending, showing his professionalism and his commitment to his teammates, while simultaneously making clear that Jerry Jones was the only obstacle between the Cowboys and their best defender having a contract. The Cowboys owner, for his part, had made the situation infinitely more complicated by doing what he almost always does, conducting what he believed to be real negotiations directly with the player without going through proper channels. Jones told reporters that he and Parsons had spoken and gone over the terms of a contract in what he believed was a negotiation. The problem? Parsons' agent, David Mulugeta, wasn't involved. And when the Cowboys tried to send the offer over, according to Jones, the agent rejected it entirely. "When we wanted to send the details to the agent told us to stick it up our ass," Jones claimed publicly. Jones added that they had reached agreements on term, amounts, and guarantees, but Mulugheta had rejected it because the agent hadn't been in the room for the original discussion with Jones and Parsons. Parsons himself seemed aware of the delicate position he was in, saying publicly, "My agent might be mad at me, I even said that. But for me, I've already been blessed enough where I can't complain too much in life." He was threading, a needle that no athlete should have to thread, trying to stay loyal to his own representative, while also not antagonizing the owner who controlled his future. It was a human drama playing out in front of millions of people. Former Cowboys players weighed in. Former Cowboys edge rusher DeMarcus Lawrence captured the tension precisely. "That's a shaky situation, man. You have an owner on one hand that's basically asking him to go prove it and play another year. But you've got a young star on the other hand that's like, I already proved enough to you. You've got to pay me my money." The veterans around the league understood this story because they had lived versions of it themselves. And in Miami, the Dolphins were dealing with their own fractured relationships. Neither Tyreek Smith nor Jalen Ramsey would be present when the Dolphins held minicamp. Smith, who was entering the final season of a 2-year, $8.4 million deal, was seeking a new contract, while the Dolphins had been looking to trade Ramsey for much of the offseason. Two separate issues, both coming to a head at the same moment, leaving head coach Mike McDaniel to walk into minicamp without key pieces and answer questions he clearly didn't want to answer. The broader context of all this drama is crucial to understand. When a star player holds out, it's a clear message to the organization that something needs to be done, usually a revised deal or an extension. In recent years, veterans have held in, appearing at training camp to avoid fines, but not participating in team drills. But what was happening in June 2025 was different in scale. This wasn't one unhappy player. This was a simultaneous eruption across multiple franchises, each driven by the same fundamental tension. The NFL's salary cap system creates artificial ceilings on player earning potential, and the most dominant players in the game were collectively refusing to accept that their market value was being suppressed. The league had watched Myles Garrett reset the defensive player market at $40 million per year with Cleveland. Every elite pass rusher and every elite defensive talent saw that number and recalibrated what they believed they were owed. And the teams, caught between cap constraints and competitive necessity, were scrambling to manage expectations they had helped create by paying Garrett that landmark figure. For the Bengals, the pressure was existential. Cincinnati was coming off a 9-8 season in which the team had missed the playoffs for the second consecutive campaign. Their defense had been a disaster despite Hendrickson's brilliance, and the front office knew that the window with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins demanded they get the supporting cast right. Losing Hendrickson, either to a holdout or a trade, would be catastrophic. And yet the process that Bengals executives were using to negotiate with him was so abrasive, so transactional, that they had turned a 3-time Pro Bowler who had delivered for them into a player who was publicly telling reporters he had no interest in staying. The fines were piling up. The press conferences were getting edgier. The fan bases were splitting between sympathy for the players and frustration at the chaos threatening their team's preparation. And then the resolutions began to arrive, slowly at first, and then all at once. Terry McLaurin and the Washington Commanders ended their standoff with a new extension for the wide receiver. Washington, perhaps the most motivated team to resolve things quickly, given their Super Bowl aspirations behind Daniels, moved first. McLaurin had made his point. The Commanders had made their calculations, and the deal got done. It was clean, professional, and ultimately a testament to what happens when both sides actually want the same thing, a long-term relationship, and just need the right moment to act on it. Pittsburgh came next. Watt, who led the NFL with 73.5 sacks in the past 5 seasons, agreed to terms with the Steelers on July 22nd, the day before players were set to report to training camp. The timing was almost theatrical, down to the wire, just as it had been in 2021, and just as Pittsburgh insider Mark Kaboly had predicted it would be. The 3-year, $123 million extension made Watt the highest-paid non-quarterback in NFL history, leaping past both Myles Garrett's $40 million per year deal and even Bengals receiver Jamar Chase's $40.3 million average. The structure was airtight, a $40 million signing bonus, followed by base salaries of $4 million in 2025 and $32 million in both 2026 and 2027, all of it guaranteed. The commitment was anchored by $108 million fully guaranteed over the first 3 years, more than any non-quarterback in league history. It was an extraordinary statement by the Steelers. No escape clauses, no phony final years padded with voidable language, just a clean, committed, historically generous contract for a player who had earned every single penny. Watt celebrated the deal by posting a picture on Instagram of him flexing and yelling in a Steelers uniform, a much different message than the peace sign he had seemingly sent earlier in the offseason. Pittsburgh exhaled. The Bengals story took longer, and it ended with more scars visible. Hendrickson's battle with the Bengals for his contract spanned the entire 2025 offseason, speaking openly about the frustration he experienced while struggling to come to terms with the team he had joined as a free agent in 2021. The stalemate included 2 separate periods in which Hendrickson and/or the Bengals explored trade possibilities, dragged into training camp, and saw Hendrickson stage both a holdout and a hold-in while his representation worked toward a deal. He went home to Florida. He refused to participate in drills. He sat in meetings while his teammates practiced around him, his presence a silent daily reminder to the front office that they had a ticking time bomb in their building. Hendrickson ultimately arrived at Bengals camp as a hold-in player who didn't do anything but participate in team meetings. He wasn't running routes. He wasn't rushing the passer. He was sitting in a room making his point through sheer expensive, patient refusal. And when the deal finally arrived at the end of August, it was vindication. Hendrickson agreed to a reworked contract that would see him earn $30 million during the 2025 season alone, nearly double his original salary, and the Parsons saga ended in the most shocking way of all. After months of back-channel negotiations, public accusations between Jones and the agent, a trade request from Parsons himself, and the Cowboys' failure to bridge the gap, Micah Parsons was traded to the Green Bay Packers on August 26th, who gave him a 4-year extension. The Cowboys received defensive tackle Kenny Clark and 2 first-round draft picks in return. A franchise cornerstone, the most dominant young defender in Dallas Cowboys history, was gone. Jerry Jones had blinked, but not in the direction anyone expected. He traded Parsons rather than pay him, and in doing so, chose future draft capital over a generational talent. The Cowboys' locker room was stunned. The fan base was heartbroken, and Parsons, the man who had shown up to Minicamp, with a smile and told the world he was ready to win a Super Bowler, was going to try to do that in Green Bay instead. When the smoke finally cleared on the 2025 NFL Minicamp Standoff season, the landscape had shifted permanently. T.J. Watt was now the highest-paid non-quarterback in NFL history. Trey Hendrickson had nearly doubled his salary through sheer force of will. Terry McLaurin had secured the extension she deserved. And Micah Parsons had been shipped out of Dallas in a trade that will be debated for a decade. But the story isn't really about dollars and cents. It's about leverage, respect, and power. The NFL system is designed to control player movement and earning potential, and what Minicamp 2025 revealed was that when enough elite players simultaneously decide they won't accept what the system offers them, the system has to respond. Front offices were forced to act. General managers were embarrassed. Owners like Jerry Jones were exposed as either too stubborn or too chaotic to close deals with the players who could most have helped them. And somewhere in a facility in Cincinnati, Katie Blackburn's comment that a player should be happy at certain rates still echoes, a reminder of exactly why players fight these battles, and why they will keep fighting them as long as the system exists the way it does.